The last exhibit. Imagine walking into a forgotten storage bunker in the mountains. Your flashlight cuts through the dust, revealing nothing but crates, broken tools, and old museum display boards. But then, in the far corner, a silhouette, a person sitting upright, still, too still. You call out, expecting them to move. They don't. You get closer, and you realize the skin isn't skin. It's hardened, shiny, preserved. Their face is frozen in a subtle, haunting expression, as if caught between fear and surrender. This is not art. This is not history. This is a human being, perfectly preserved, like a museum exhibit. And the person who did this didn't just work in any museum. He built his own, hidden in the mountains. This is the disturbing investigative true crime case of Lena Cole, and the man who turned her into the last exhibit. Lena Cole was 27 years old, a landscape photographer from Vermont, known for her calm temperament, her gentle manner of speaking, and her obsession with capturing untouched trails. She wasn't famous, but her small community loved her, especially because she often photographed locations forgotten by most hikers. On September 14, 2017, Lena left her apartment with her usual kit: her camera, 2 lenses, a journal, a hydration pack, and an emergency beacon she rarely used. Her plan, written on a sticky note left on her fridge, was simple. Big Elk Ridge, back by sunset. Big Elk Ridge was an irregular stretch of the Appalachian Mountains, known for deep ravines, abandoned fire towers, and forgotten forestry cabins dating back to the 1920s. Lena had hiked it dozens of times. She wasn't reckless. She told no stories of fear or superstition. She simply wanted to take photos of early autumn light on the ridge. She texted her sister at 9:42 a.m., "Heading up now. You'll love these colors." That was the last message anyone ever received. When Lena didn't return that night, her sister assumed her phone had died. But by noon the next day, when Lena still hadn't shown up, panic set in. A search was launched immediately. State police, volunteers, drones, tracking dogs. They mobilized faster than usual, partly because the terrain was dangerous, and partly because Lena had a flawless hiking record. If she wasn't home, something was wrong. Her car was found at the trailhead in perfect condition. No signs of struggle, nothing strange around it. But 30 minutes into the trail, searchers found something unsettling. Her camera lens cap, placed neatly on a rock, not dropped, not dirty, not cracked, just placed there. Search dogs followed a scent for nearly 3 hours, but the trail suddenly stopped at an old fire road, one not used in over 20 years. The dogs went in circles, then sat down, as if the scent simply disappeared. Rescuers assumed Lena had slipped, or taken a wrong turn, or injured herself. But as days passed and no trace appeared, not a scrap of clothing, not a footprint, the case began turning into something darker. Storms rolled in. Temperatures dropped. By day 8, the official rescue was called off. The case shifted from missing hiker to unexplained disappearance. For 2 years, nothing happened. No new evidence, no witness accounts, no collected items ever linked to Lena. Her family held vigils. Her sister kept the apartment as Lena left it. Plants watered, mail sorted. Her camera gear remained untouched. Police quietly labeled it a cold case. Until October 3, 2019, when 2 hunters in a restricted forestry zone discovered something unrelated, yet horrifying. The hunters were tracking a deer near the old Marlow storage depot. A relic from the 1960s used to house museum transport crates. The building had been forgotten. When the state moved its historical archives to a new facility, The men weren't looking for trouble, just deer. But when they noticed a locked steel hatch sitting crooked on the ground, one that looked recently disturbed, they assumed an animal got trapped or a vandal had been exploring. They pried it open with a crowbar. The smell wasn't decay. It was chemicals. Inside, a passage led down into a storage bunker lined with dust-covered boxes and collapsed shelving. The first hunter stepped inside with his flashlight. The beam hit a wooden chair, and in that chair, a human figure, a woman, sitting upright, hands resting on her lap, eyes open. Except the eyes weren't wet. They were glassy, fixed, preserved, skin smooth, hardened, pale beige with a slight shine, like a mannequin incorrectly colored. The men panicked. One threw up, the other sprinted for cell service. When police arrived, they discovered more. 3 display pedestals, empty, but clearly used recently. A drying rack with paintbrushes soaked in hardening agents. Large drums of polymer chemicals. Blueprints of human anatomy sketches. And a handwritten label. Exhibit IVA temporary placement. The woman in the chair was identified through jaw structure and healed fractures. It was Lena Cole, except she wasn't decomposed. She was preserved completely. The medical examiner had no immediate explanation. Lena's body had no rot, no collapse of tissue. Her facial muscles were intact. Her skin was rigid, covered in a thin, wax resin mixture. She had been dead for nearly 2 years, but looked like she had passed away a week ago. The examiner noted no signs of animal activity, no decomposition odor, skin surface coated in synthetic polymers, internal organs partially drained, no environmental damage. Someone had attempted a homemade plastination. Plastination is a real scientific process used for anatomy displays. Bodies are drained of liquids and infused with polymers. But this technique was modified, crude, experimental, illegal. Whoever did this was either a museum technician or someone obsessed with preservation. The ME also identified bruising around Lena's wrists, consistent with restraints. Cause of death, likely chemical asphyxiation. In other words, the killer preserved her while she was still alive. Police now had a body, a location, a method, but they didn't have a suspect. Investigators began focusing on people with access to museum storage facilities, preservation chemicals, knowledge of polymer sealing, detailed anatomy skills, and familiarity with restricted mountain areas. A forensic team cross-referenced the unusual chemicals found in the bunker with purchase records. One name appeared repeatedly: Elliot Marston. Elliot Marston, 42, was a former museum restoration specialist who had worked at the Northeastern Museum of Cultural Heritage. He wasn't fired. He simply quit abruptly in 2016. Co-workers described him as quiet, overly meticulous, awkward around people, overly attached to his restoration projects, someone who preferred mannequins to co-workers. He once told a colleague, "Living things are messy, exhibits are perfect." He lived alone in a rented workshop 12 miles from Big Elk Ridge. He owned a truck matching tire impressions near the storage bunker. He purchased industrial polymer resin in bulk. And most importantly, he once had access to keys for the abandoned Marlow Depot facility. When questioned initially, Elliot appeared calm. Too calm. He claimed he hadn't hiked that ridge in years. But investigators found fresh mud on his boots matching the restricted zone's soil. A search warrant was issued. Inside Elliot's workshop, police found sketches of human poses, notes on plastination experiments, order receipts for chemicals, a custom drainage table, a drying rack full of hardened gloves, and a chilling journal labeled The Stillness Project. Inside the journal were pages describing his obsession with capturing life in perfect stasis. He wrote, "People move, people fade. But an exhibit remains exactly as it should." And then photos of Lena, taken from a distance on trails, months before she disappeared. She was targeted. Through forensic reconstruction and Elliot's journal, investigators pieced together the horrifying process. Elliot had followed Lena on the day she vanished. He waited on the old fire road where the scent trail ended. He used a chemical inhalant to incapacitate her. He transported her in his truck to the Marlowe bunker. He began the preservation, immersing her in polymer solution, draining bodily fluids, sealing skin with resin, positioning her in a resting pose, treating her like a museum artifact. The process likely took days, not hours. During parts of it, she was still alive. When confronted with the evidence, Elliot didn't scream, didn't deny, didn't shake. He simply said, "She was meant to be seen." Detectives asked him why he chose her. He replied, "She was peaceful. People like that make the best exhibits." It became clear that Elliot didn't think he had murdered her. He believed he had preserved her beauty. His voice stayed calm throughout. His eyes didn't show guilt, only irritation that police had interfered with his work. The courtroom was filled every day. Journalists called him the exhibit maker. Prosecutors called him a cold, methodical predator. Elliot showed no remorse, no empathy. He asked repeatedly if he could retrieve the polymer coating from evidence boxes for future study. The jury took only 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. He received life imprisonment without parole. When the sentence was read, Elliot whispered, "She was my last exhibit, but she wasn't supposed to be the last." Lena's family was allowed to reclaim her body, something they feared would never happen. Forensic teams removed the polymer coating. Her remains were buried quietly in her hometown. Only close relatives attended. A small framed photo was placed on the grave, one she took on Elk Ridge during her final summer. Peaceful, natural, alive. The opposite of what Elliot tried to turn her into. Some cases end with justice. Some end with answers. But cases like Lena's, they leave behind something heavier. A reminder that monsters don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes they work in bright museums, restoring artifacts, preserving history, while secretly planning to create their own twisted exhibits. And sometimes, the most terrifying crimes are committed not in rage, but in cold, calculated stillness. This was the story of Lena Cole, a woman who loved the mountains, a photographer who chased the light, and the victim of a man who tried to freeze her in time forever. Her story lives on, not as an exhibit, but as a warning.